Right, welcome back. Hopefully you can actually hear Matt this time. Is that better? I hope so. In terms of what we're saying, we've got a week to Cheltenham.
Incredible. Only a week to go to the festival, and you know, I'd like to say I'm really looking forward. It doesn't. You know, as I've got older, it's like Christmas almost. Where Christmas doesn't seem the same, does it? Unless you're young. And I just can't believe the festival's just round the corner, and I've got plenty of work to do between now and then.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, we have got Paul Nicholls' interview coming up later, and we are going to look in depth at the Arkle. But this part of the programme is all about you and you sending in those emails and tweets. And to be honest with you, they are becoming more and more each week. But first of all, we're going to address a couple of those tweets. Sean Taylor, as a punter, how do you play Gigginstown horses? If they have more than one in a race, it seems not always the right one wins.
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting because we cover this with not just those horses, but quite often, don't you? You have two horses in a stable, and you might have, for example, let's use Philip Hobbs as an analogy, really. So you've got a horse with Richard Johnson riding, you've got a horse of Tom O'Brien riding, and of course Richard Johnson is apparently going to be the more fancied horse. But it's a very dangerous game to start assuming this. You don't know what goes on in the owners and trainers and the agreement. Some horses don't get better than others. But all I would say to any arrangement, of course second strings do win, and it's not because the game's crooked and not for these other reasons, because they've won their horses, and secondly, how many times did we see it last year at the Cheltenham Festival, McCoy getting it wrong?
Well, you also have Paul Nicholls we've got on later on. I mean, Noel Feely is going to ride Sarkander because of the connections. It's not
absolutely.
Not necessarily.
In answer to the question, just have a look at the form. As always I say, read the form first before you start looking at jockeys who's riding and odds, because what you will get, if you do fancy an apparent second string, you're going to get enhanced odds, and that's what I like to look for. And
you know, it does happen quite a bit.
Yeah, it does.
Right, we got another email from Ross. He said, I like the way he introduces himself, fella, which I guess is you, Matt.
Blimey.
I've spotted one for the Fred Winter. Rockefeller. I think it's been crying out for better ground based on flat form, good form behind decent animals, and your thoughts on this horse. Have you looked at the form of that, Matt?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, he came across, he's been beaten by the same horse twice. A very good horse, admittedly, of Mr. Ferguson's. Rockefeller was good ground last time, but I did got a feeling that I slightly disagree with obviously better ground might have, but I do think he's run well this season on soft ground as well. I mean, from a handicap point of view, he is entered for the Fred Winter. It's whether he'll get in, I guess, really. I mean, he's 20 to 1 at the moment. He's got a mark of 125. I thought that was high enough for a race like the Fred Winter. On my private handicap, Ross, I've got him 134. So you might say, well, that's well handicapped, £9. Believe me, to win a Fred Winter, if you looked at like the likes of Hawkeye last year, you need
the official rating for the horse is what?
The official rating is 125, where I've got him 134.
So you haven't got him miles ahead?
Not miles ahead. He would struggle for me. I'm not sure he's got the class, and also he stayed a mile and a half well on the flat, and I've got a feeling that he just looked a bit slow to me. I mean, obviously they got plenty of ability because he started off on all the grade tracks. You know, he's been to New, he's been to Doncaster, so they must feel. But I think his future will probably lay over further, probably 2.5 miles. You know, I'm probably good to soft ground.
What do you think of the transition from flat? We see this less actually now than we used to. The transition from flat until jumps. I mean, do you buy the fact? I mean, I always look at a mile 4 thinking, well, it'll stay 2.5 miles possibly, mile 6, maybe even 3 miles. Is that the way you look at it?
Yeah, I normally, in my mind, I mean, if you stay a mile and a half on the flat, you're guaranteed to stay over jumps, which is 2 miles. But generally, I think if you stay a mile and a quarter, you'll be guaranteed to get 2 miles. Mile and a half on the flat, generally you start thinking we need a little bit further, you know, 2.5. 2 miles 6, and from a rating point of view, this is interesting. I mean, he's quite right what he says, because this horse has a flat rating of 76. Now, if you're translating, well, if you've got a 76 animal, if he can take that ability to a different discipline over jumps, what could he be? I usually add on 40. I mean, there's no science to it, but generally you do around there. So you would expect off a mark of 76. You know, I'm not quite sure how, you know, he should be before.
Make 116.
116. So off 125. So there's difference. If you get some very high class flat horses, you know, rated in the hundreds, you know, they can perform into the 150s, 160s. There's no great science, but a 76 horse on the flat, you're no slouch, are you? You're just underneath being what I would say just getting towards useful. So you off a 125, you should be competitive, but I don't necessarily think well handicapped. But Rockefeller, I think he's a horse that will win races, but not quite at that level.
Okay, Right, there were some very good races at the weekend, and we haven't got very long actually, but we are going to talk about a few of them. Glingerburn beating Bristol de May. £9 in a beating, it must be added. Aintree or Scottish Champion Hurdle is the forecast. No Cheltenham entries for Glingerburn. How impressed were you?
Yeah, very, very impressed. The second time we've seen this horse recently, I think that good ground's the key to this horse. But Nicky Richards has been very mindful to keep him away from bad winter ground. I mean, this was good to soft, and it was probably as soft as the horse would like it. I think this is real strong form. I mean, Glingerburn himself, he was second behind Hawk High the time before at Kelsey, who I put up for, obviously, the Betfair Hurdle. Didn't go for that race. And I remember thinking at the time, called this Glingerburn, because I know Hawk High, and look out for Hawk High in the County Hurdle. I think he's going for. Look out for him. He's seriously well handicapped. But this Glingerburn, of course, beat Bristol de May. Many will look at that and say, well, Bristol de May has become very disappointing. I disagree. Bristol de May was behind, obviously, Gardler Victor last time, and Gardler Victor, in turn, was behind Hawk High at the beginning of the season. So the form does begin to make sense. And there was a Glingerburn beat 8 lengths back to Intense Tango, and she was a Grade 2 winner in herself. I think this is real strong form. Glingerburn had an official mark of 145. I had him performing to 160, and Bristol de May not disgraced at all, just faced a real high quality animal on 157. So this going forward for Grade 2, I believe, will turn out to be Grade 1 form for the winner.
Yeah, I mean, Bristol de May, if you are connections to that, you'll be slightly disappointed. I mean, that win at Chepstow has not been matched, in my view. Right, OK, Sound Investment beat Benny's Mist at the weekend, and at Paul Nicholls Saturday. I thought it was handicapped to the hilt, but how...
yeah, I mean, before the race, I didn't think he was well handicapped. I had him to mark a 162. I believe he's performed to that mark. He was going off a 149. Benny's Mist, who was in second, back to his best when he was winning. Remember when he won a couple of times on the trot at Wincanton last year? I think he was back to that form, kind of lost his way.
These two were clear.
They were clear, 17 lengths. Apart from the first two home, I think the horses in behind perhaps have run a little bit under their form, maybe a sign that the handicap has got to them. Sound Investment and Benny's Mist will struggle in handicaps from now on. I'm pretty sure of that. But take nothing away from Sound Investment. Paul Nicholls will be on the phone shortly. And what that horse, where he's been ever so progressive. I mean, where he started from, you know, he didn't look like he was going to be much of an animal at all.
No.
To be now winning off 149, I think, to 162 horse, just goes to show what Paul Nicholls can do with horses in that yard.
Bal Musetti, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, ridden by Mr. Reevely, beat Dolan Milan, who looked an ungenuine sort coming. I mean,
Yeah.
2 from home, it looked like Dolan Milan was going to win.
Sure.
And then didn't find much. We had the Irish horse, Golan Way, wasn't it? Or
Golan Road.
Golan Road, sorry. And that disappointed. But how impressed were you?
I was actually impressed with him. In this horse, I think surprised me, but it was the step up to 3 miles from the first time, where a Dolan Milan was going up, looking like it might need to come down. I was impressed with this, and last week in the mare's race, I did actually say that the Pirates Queen would be my selection, and this gave it a lovely franking. I mean, the Pirates Queen thrashed this horse, admittedly over 2.5 miles, but I thought that gave a right franking. A Dolan Milan came clear. She did 10 lengths, like you said, hanging. I would say. First of all, I thought it was something, the reins might have snapped or something to go. He looked very awkward. It wasn't. The horse was hanging like a barn gate. Princess Tara back in third, 15-8 favourite. I think there's a lot to like about this form, and I certainly think she could be quite high class herself. And I just thought it gives a nice ranking to Pilot Queen.
And as you said, in relation to the horse that won, I mean, the Pirates Queen annihilated it.
Absolutely.
It didn't just beat it.
Absolutely.
It was well behind. So the Pirates Queen...
that's given it a big franking.
Absolutely.
And that Pirates Queen, for me, I mean, it confirmed last week. I mean, it's a lot more stronger interest now than last week. I was thinking it was a bit of value. Now thinking, you know, go and have a good look at that.
Now, at some point in Cheltenham, you're probably going to win big, and you're going to have a big van of cash. So we might have to call the cops. How impressed were you? I mean, it's now 8-1 for the Attempts, 12-1 for Coral. I mean, it was very impressive, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, and absolutely kicking myself. I sat on Bet Racing Nation back in November and gave it as an eye catcher. We both sat and watched it. Both said how well handicapped it was, and I looked at this race on Friday, and I didn't back it. And it's one of those that got away well handicapped, and wasn't it impressive? I mean, you could argue the David Pipe horse hasn't run its race, and that's probably right. But call the cops under Andrew Tinkler. How many pulls did he have to take on the way round? Came there first time at the trip, but there was no doubt that the horse was always going to improve for that. That was the extended 3.5 miles. had the horse perform at a 148, had an official mark of 133. On its best form, that was over a bit shorter when I was putting it up at a 149. It's now going to go to the festival when it's in the Coral Cup and the Pretemps at 8-1. I won't be getting involved because if I haven't been on that day at 3-1, I just, you know, if you haven't been to the wedding, why go to the funeral? But Call the Cops are very, very exciting. But I'm not, what I would say is that I'm not sure these Coral Cup and these Pretemps big handicaps, you need an awful lot in hand. And I'm not absolutely sure, even though when Call the Cops gets the penalty, whether he will have enough in hand. I'm not sure if he will be value with the penalty at 8-1.
Can I remind you of those words back in November, Matt, from the show, and saying, look, watch out for Call the Cops when it steps up to 3 miles.
You want to be on.
You want to be on. And were you on?
I wasn't have a penny on. I didn't
The amazing thing about Call the Cops is it was entered for every single race, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And the ground kept going against it. We had the Pipe Hot Pot in this race, run no sort of race at all.
Yeah.
Do you value the form going forward? I mean, I know what you said about 8-1 the Pretemps, and Pretemps is a notoriously difficult race to find the winner, but it puts him in the picture. It got the penalty that enabled the horse to get in there, and everything.
I mean, I had Walt Starling going into the race as the reason I didn't back Call to the Cops is because there was 3 horses in this race I had well handicapped as well, and that's including Walt Starling, who was second. I had a mark of 132 running off 122. So if you allot that mark in, Call the Cops comes out, I say, around the 148 mark. I think Alco, even though 14 lengths back in third, people say I think that's run its race, you know, and I think this is some real serious form. That the ground's clearly the key for Call the Cops, and it was one of those, unfortunately, that got away from me and very frustrating. But like everything, when you assess races and, you know, you have a slight doubt, the best thing always to do is stay out. It does hurt, though.
Yeah, but when you say you didn't go to the wedding but the funeral, are you saying because you didn't back it there, you're not going to back it?
I wouldn't back it at 8-1 now if I'm not on at Freeze, because in terms of value, in that race, have we seen 3-1's a tremendous price. Now, you're going to the Cheltenham Festival, a lot more competitive race. You've got a penalty on. Why would you want to take the 8s?
You missed out.
I did.
Okay, right. After the break, we've got Paul Nicholls on the phone. We are going to be talking about the Arkle. That obviously contains Vibrato Valtat up against Underso. What a race that's going to be. We're also going to take a look at our own preview of the race a little bit later on as well and give our ratings on the race. And this man here is going against a favourite. What's he going with? We'll find out very soon. We're going to take a very short break. And after the break, we'll have Paul Nicholls on the phone. See you then.